Hello, everyone. Welcome to Preemie Chats. Preemie Chats is a program that is for healthcare professionals and for parents to talk about what matters most to you, to explore new ideas, and to learn together. I'm Leah Whitehead. I'm a NICU mom of a former preemie, and I'm also a former journalist, and I'm happy to be your host today. I'm coming to you live from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Preemie Chats was created and is put on by the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation, also well known as CPBF. The foundation is a parent-led charitable organization that helps families in and after NICU through education, support, and advocacy. If you have a heart for preemies, whether you are a healthcare professional or a family, you can head over to canadianpreemies.org, and there you will find many resources, the latest projects, and most importantly, a community of people who want to see our little ones thrive. Today's session is live, so I invite you to bring your voice to the table and also let us know where you're watching from. It's always interesting to see where people are tuning in from and to get their feedback as we go on with today's program. It is through rich conversations like the one that we're going to have today that helps us advance practice and learn together. So please participate. Let us know where you're watching from and give us your questions and your comments as we go as well. Today's topic is not an easy one, but it's one that many families experience. Families who experience the death of their baby, they often feel isolated, stigmatized, and left to find their way through grief alone. The loss of one or more of a family's multiple birth often brings unique grief and support needs for a family because they're navigating two emotional things at once, welcoming one baby and saying goodbye to another. Pregnancy and Infant Loss, or PAIL Network, is a volunteer-led peer support program that offers bereavement support at no cost to families in Ontario. They also provide education for professionals who care for and support families after their loss. And today we're going to hear about their latest resource, Loving and Losing: Loss of a Multiple. To guide us through this topic today, we're going to be joined by Amy Muir and Megan Donoghue. Megan Donoghue is currently a clinical educator for the Level 3 NICU at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre in Toronto. She's also the chair of the Women and Babies Bereavement Committee and has been an educator for the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Network for the past 10 years. Amy Muir is the Volunteer Resource and Support Coordinator with the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Network, and she designed the volunteer program and manages the 92 peer support volunteers and 34 community support volunteers across the province. So thank you both for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having us. This is a really important conversation, and it's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share about the work that we do and to share our new resource with you. Thank you.
I'll let you get right to your presentation. I know you have a lot to share with us.
Great. I do have a lot to share. It's so exciting to do this, and to try to limit it to 20 minutes is the challenge. So we'll get going. You've said it earlier. Pregnancy and infant loss is really a unique type of grief. I like the term an unseen grief, or as opposed to disenfranchised grief. That's a much more of a clinical sounding term, but really it's a type of grief that has some stigma attached to it, regardless of the loss experience. I talk to hundreds of people who come forward to volunteer, and I have the honor of hearing their stories. And in most of them, I hear this, that is a type of experience of loss where they don't feel like they can publicly mourn or acknowledge their grief in a way that is accepted by others in their community, in their group of family or friends. So it's really important for us as an organization to really help change the culture of that conversation and to help people understand that it is really meaningful and very impactful to give families the space to be able to grieve openly about this type of loss. In particular, as it relates to the work we've been doing to create this new booklet on loss of a multiple, and we're very close to starting a new support group online also for folks who've experienced the loss of a multiple. One of our volunteers said to me that it was when they were leaving the hospital with their living baby, their other baby who lived for 19 hours, and who shared the bed in the NICU with his brother before he died. When they were leaving, he said, "Is Frank still a twin?" And he was puzzled by that because he wasn't really sure if that was still his role. So we recognize that this type of unseen grief has a real impact on relationships. Am I the parent of twins still? Is my son still a twin himself? So it really gives it really gives people just a change in what they're used to hearing, and what is sort of normal in the grief world. Some more of it's not unaccepted, but it's not a common conversation. So they don't really feel like they can openly talk about it without making other people uncomfortable. So really important to recognize that pregnancy and infant loss, generally speaking, is a type of a grief that comes with stigma. And then adding that additional layer of losing one of the multiples in that pregnancy adds another layer of an unseen type of grief. They're trying to be happy for the birth of and coming home with a healthy baby, while also leaving space and being, feeling like they have permission to grieve the loss of the one that isn't coming home. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes to share with you a little bit about Pregnancy and Infant Loss Network, because some people who are on this or watching this may be hearing about us for the first time. PAIL Network is an organization that offers support at no cost to bereaved families across Ontario. We also offer healthcare and service professionals education. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as well. And another notable comment is that our entire program for bereaved families is offered by way of volunteers. So people who have been trained to understand the concept and important role of peer support, how it's different from being a clinician, and how it's different from being a friend. So we couldn't do this type of work without our volunteers. So I wanted to take a moment to share about them, because they are the reason that we're able to do this really important work. To start with our support program, the type of support that's offered for families, I have a few slides about this, but we do have some in-person mixed loss groups we call circles of support. Before COVID, we actually had 30 active group locations across the province. And then, of course, COVID changed that. And we are now slowly getting back to offering support in person in the communities that are listed on this slide: Belleville, Hamilton, Durham North, Thunder Bay, Peterborough, Ottawa, and Aurora. These groups meet monthly, and they are mixed loss groups. So people who may be in and around those communities who've had any type of a loss would be welcome to reach out for support and find out the location to join these groups. We also offer online support. So in fact, prior to COVID, we had started offering online support. And since COVID, this has become the primary source of support that families have been receiving. So you'll see on the left-hand side, our loss-specific online support groups. We do have groups broken down by types of losses, so that when people join their group, they're able to have very meaningful conversations with others who've had a loss like theirs. On the right-hand side, you'll see some of our other online groups. We have a group for people who are parenting, people who have living children and who have had a loss, and who may be wanting to talk about parenting those living children, about grief, and to help them understand their grief. Maybe they were a part of the experience of the pregnancy. Maybe the pregnancy happened before them, and they'd like to have conversations with other parents about how they can help their living children know and remember their baby, their sibling that's not here with them today. We have a group for partners, so the non-birthing partner of the family. We have a group for people who are trying to conceive, who aren't yet pregnant, but who are trying after loss. And then we have a group for people who are pregnant after a loss, so they can have conversations about sort of those feelings of excitement of being pregnant again, but also the fear because they know what can happen. We just started a group for grandparents, the unique experience of a grandparent grieving the loss of a grandchild, but also grieving for their child. So we're recognizing that there are ripples of that affect the different family members when a loss has occurred. Coming soon, we're working very closely with different communities, Indigenous communities across the province, to bring an Indigenous Circle of Support group online. And we are very close to starting our group for loss of a multiple online. We just need to look at the calendar and to make that fit. So it's very likely that group will appear in the springtime. One of the other ways that we offer support too that's quite well used, I'll say, or people have opted in, is for our phone support program. So we do offer one-to-one phone support for people who may not want to be in an online group or may not want to talk to a group of people they don't know about their loss. Maybe there's something about their experience that feels really, really unique that they want to talk to someone else who has something very similar. So when I interview our volunteers, we talk about their loss and maybe some of those unique matching points. It might be a specific diagnosis that they know of and the reason why perhaps their baby didn't survive. It could be that they have children or that they don't have children, and our families may request support and say, you know, I'd really like to talk to somebody who has children, who may be parenting while also grieving, or I'd like to talk to someone who doesn't have children. I don't want to talk about children right now. And that's a common request. And so what we're very proud of with our phone support program is that we are able to match as closely as possible the family with a volunteer who's had a similar experience. We do receive, on average, around 100 requests for support each month. Most people do reach out and are included in our online group. Some people who are close to our geographic groups are able to participate in those groups in person, or they'll receive phone support. People can also be a part of all of these different types of supports. Requesting support is as simple as going online. A family does not need a referral from a healthcare provider to receive support with us. They can go onto our website. I've put on this slide the website. I've also included a QR code. So if you point your camera at that and click or touch the link, you'll be able to access this exact form to be able to share with families. Or if you yourself are a family that may be thinking about receiving support with us, then we just ask that you complete this form. And once you've submitted it, it comes to us, and someone from our office, who is our referrals coordinator, will reach out to you by your choice of either phone or email, and we'll get you involved in ways that are most meaningful for you. We also accept requests for support from professionals. So there's a professional form for requesting support on behalf of a family that can also be found on our website under the professionals tab. I don't want to give too much of this away because I know Megan's going to talk about it, but we're really proud of the education that we offer for healthcare and service professionals as well. There's a lot of information on our website under our professionals tab about different ways that we support healthcare providers. There's many resources and videos that you can watch. One of the ways that we offer support to healthcare providers is a compassionate care workshop, which is a one-day workshop for people to come to learn more about how they can offer a more compassionate experience for families who are experiencing a loss or who have experienced a loss. Megan is one of our educators, so I don't want to take too much of her thunder and tell you all about it, but what I can tell you is that there's a 1-hour family panel at midway during the day where families join the workshop and share about their experience of loss and help the healthcare providers understand where they felt in their care they felt supported. Where did they feel like a positive, impactful difference was made, and perhaps where did they feel like the support could have been stronger. As I mentioned, we have an amazing section on our website for professionals that I would encourage you, if you are a professional, to have a look at. There's a lot of videos online that are helpful. We, in the past and in the future, will offer interprofessional education for students. We've gone to the University of Toronto to do different workshops for students. We've done workshops for the College of Midwifery. So there's many opportunities that are available for healthcare providers, and we simply request, if you're interested, to reach out to us via our website to let us know how we can support you. In my role as the Volunteer Resource and Support Coordinator, I really felt it was an important part of this chat to take a moment to share our gratitude to our volunteers. All of our volunteers who offer support to families have also had a loss. And so we're really grateful for them to share their heart and to share their very deeply personal experience of loss with other families in the hopes of making that a little lighter for families who are experiencing a loss currently. We also have volunteers who haven't had a loss, who are around the province and their community sharing about the work that we do so that they're able to help families come to PAIL Network for the type of support that they may not have known about otherwise. So just a small moment to share our appreciation and share our thank you to all of our volunteers. So PAIL Network has many different resources. I know we're here to talk about the one, but we have a lot of different resources on our website that are available. We have resources that are in the form of booklets. They can be viewed on our website in 7 different languages that are listed on the lower end of the slide. There are brochures that can be ordered by healthcare providers to be placed in and around their organization. We also have posters that can be shared. Both of them are pictured here. There are some additional resources that are available on our website that you can look at on the web that can sometimes be printed. There are some that are not able to be printed, but that can be ordered. So we have, I think that in a little bit, one of the pieces that Megan will share with you is how you can order those. So one of the pieces that I'd like to share with you today is, how do we identify where the gaps are? So how did we come to create this new booklet? Is it something that we heard about? Is it something that we had been requested to create? And so as part of the team of people who create resources, I thought I'd take a moment to share with you about how we created this booklet. So we have families, we have different opportunities for families to share their feedback with us. We have consultations that we're doing, in fact, right now, where we welcome families to share with us about their experiences to help shape the future of the support that we offer. So we really encourage people to share how we can help them. We do send evaluations to families. We send evaluations to volunteers. We send evaluations to healthcare providers, because we would really like to hear from those people who are impacted by our support or are promoting our support, to better understand how we can make their work easier, how we can help people to receive support from us in the most meaningful way, and for volunteers, how we can provide them with resources that are most meaningful for them as a volunteer, so that they can offer the most impactful support to families. And I will say, as being part of these conversations over the years even, we have heard that it really is a gap in resources for families who've experienced the loss of a twin. We have volunteers who have said, I brought one baby home and one baby died. Or we have volunteers and families who've come forward who are currently pregnant and have had to have a reduction. Excuse me. So we've had conversations as a team about where these gaps are, and this quickly became a priority. And I have to say that I really feel that it is because people have become more comfortable with sharing some of the aspects of their losses that may have otherwise been not shared because of the fear of stigma. And I hope that the comfort that people have with PAIL Network is the reason why they're able to disclose some of their needs in a more supportive way. Um, and I would encourage all of you who are watching and listening, if you're a family or if you're a professional, if there are other ways that you feel that we could offer our support to you as an organization in the way of resources, that you reach out to us, because we may not be able to make it happen right away, but we most definitely make note and record all of the requests, and we are able to, in many cases, make those requests come true. So I'm going to pass it over to Megan now to talk with you about this amazing new resource that we've just launched, Loving and Losing the Loss of a Multiple.
Thank you, Amy. Hello, everyone. Bonjour. Thank you for joining us today. Amy and I are so pleased to be here on behalf of the PAIL Network to speak about not only the work that PAIL does, but this new resource that we have recently launched. One of the things that came up with our needs assessment from families and working with our volunteers was recognizing this gap for those families that are navigating this two-pronged journey, like Amy mentioned, of caring for one or more living babies while grieving the loss of a baby more than one baby that has died. So we recognize that this was really important to address, as we know there are a large number of multiple pregnancies and births that happen across the country, and the more babies that someone is pregnant with at a time, the more chance there is that there may be a risk of something going wrong or a complication in the pregnancies. So when we think about grief and the way that families navigate grief after their baby dies, um, the challenges are similar, but with multiple layers when there are living babies or a live pregnancy to continue. So we were very, very fortunate. Every resource that PAIL has developed has been developed in partnership with healthcare providers as well as bereaved families who have this lived experience. So we were very fortunate to partner with our dear friend Fabiana, who shared her lived experience, and I was able to work with her as well as the rest of our PAIL team to bring in the healthcare provider side of this work in presenting or producing this booklet. You can go to the next slide, Amy. So we know from speaking with families that have had this experience that they're often placed in the position of hearing significantly insensitive comments from folks that don't recognize the either because of the discomfort and the lack of knowledge about pregnancy and infant loss in general, or because I am so sorry. I have some dogs in my house that heard a noise, so they're protecting us all today. Or because there is still a living baby or potentially more than one living baby, that the loss of the multiple is kind of swept aside and ignored because they think, well, if there's still another baby, we don't have to focus on that sad business of one or more of them dying. And we've heard parents have received messages, or people have said things to them like, well, at least you still have one baby, or some people don't even get to take one baby home. For those who experience the loss of a multiple during a pregnancy, particularly if it's early in the pregnancy, they may hear things like, it was so early, it wasn't even a real baby. And then often families are not encouraged or supported to actually grieve, whether that's because you really should be happy for the baby that's living, or don't be sad, the other baby will feel it, or we're not going to talk about that sad thing because we have this happy thing we can focus on. We know, both through working with families, but also through the evidence and the literature, that when families delay processing or they ignore their grief about the baby that's died because they're focusing on the living baby, it can be very, very challenging for folks moving forward. It can complicate their grief. It can also make it difficult for them to make decisions, not just about the baby that's died, if there are decisions to make about burial or things like that, but also to make decisions for the baby that is living, particularly if that baby's health is in jeopardy. The fear and the worry about the living baby can often take over and cause some families to push that grief aside and in that they can't think about it right now. But for other families, the grief can actually affect how they attach to the living baby. So it can be a really, really complicated and messy journey for these families. And so we know from a caregiver point of view, so for anybody that's out there that's a healthcare provider that may work with families who have lost one or more of a set of multiples, there is a much higher risk of disenfranchised grief, or this unseen grief that Amy spoke of, if caregivers and support people discourage the family from talking about the baby that died, or discourage them from acknowledging their experience. And if you encourage them to focus just on the living baby, then we're actually doing them a little bit of a disservice. So really, the way that we can help these families is to recognize that difficulty attaching to the living baby is very common and very normal, and really trying to help them explore how they can navigate a path that is going in two very, very different directions, to help them bond and attach to the baby that's still alive while still processing that grief that they're experiencing from their loss. Next slide, please, Amy. Thank you. So over a number of months, actually, I've lost track. It might have even been about a year. We were able to work on putting together this booklet for families. This booklet has a number of topics in it, and some of them are listed here. The booklet is intended to address issues from a family point of view. So the language is meant to be simple enough that families can understand what we're talking about, not over medicalized, and will not only provide some medical information, very generalized, because we recognize everybody's experience is going to be unique, and we certainly don't want to make assumptions about someone's medical journey. But there will be information about the difference between a loss, for example, before 20 weeks gestation versus after, things like that, what they can expect, some questions to ask their care providers and their support people. We explore memory making and the idea of legacy building, not just because they've had a loss, but also in the context of recognizing that there is a sibling or more than one sibling that will move forward with this piece missing from their history, and what are the ways that we can help them have the memories and the tangible proof that this baby was a multiple, and that this person was part of their history when they are older and may ask questions. We also give advice or suggestions on how to parent that living baby, and support the older siblings. Amy had mentioned about the volunteer asking if his son is still a twin. And, for many families, we really just have to take their lead and ask them how they feel. When we have a situation in our NICU where we lose one of a multiple, we like to have a conversation with families. Would you still like us to refer to this baby as twin B? Some families will say yes, and some families will say, no, I'd like you to refer to her as Ava, instead of twin B, or just baby Green, for example. But it's not up to us to decide how a family should navigate this journey. And so as healthcare providers, really just asking questions and remaining curious with families, as well as gently providing suggestions if they don't know what they want and how to navigate that, is probably the best way we can support them. A big part in all of our booklets is normalizing the grief journey and providing support and resources for family. So many families will verbalize really challenging emotions during grief. And because of this unseen grief, this public stigma about talking about pregnancy and infant loss, so many families feel like they don't have a voice, or the feelings that they're having are abnormal, and that they shouldn't tell anybody, they shouldn't ask anybody, because nobody talks about this stuff. So if I'm really struggling, there must be something wrong with me. So really normalizing these things that can happen. These are some of the things that this booklet contains. Next slide, please, Amy. So as Amy mentioned, there's a number of ways to access resources, and we probably, because this is a national forum, we probably should circle back for a second to the fact that PAIL is a provincially mandated program. As a result, unfortunately, we cannot mail printed resources to people outside of Ontario. However, everything that is on the website that is either downloadable or viewable is open internationally. Anybody can go to it. I confirmed with Amy this morning that we don't block IP addresses or anything like that. But unfortunately, we cannot send printed resources outside of Ontario. So if you are inside of Ontario and you are a healthcare professional and would like to have the resources in your place of work, then our PAIL pamphlets are free, and you can just order them and we will mail them to you. This is a pamphlet that you can give to families who are experiencing a loss or have experienced a loss in the past, that will tell them what PAIL is and how to get in touch with us. And then the booklets about the specific losses are available for $1 a piece to cover printing costs. And you have to, I think it's a minimum order of 10 per language. However, most of our booklets in most of the languages are available to view on our website. So if you would like to take a look at the contents of the booklet, or if you'd like to refer someone to look at one, you're welcome to do that at the PAIL on the PAIL Network website. The other thing that we have now is we actually have posters for medical facilities, hospitals, doctors' offices, midwife clinics that have also a scannable QR code on it for families, and those posters are also free. So we really encourage you to take a look at the PAIL Network website, whether you are a bereaved family or whether you support families, to take a look at the resources that we have. We have a number of videos on memory making. We have information on how to support families who are lactating after a loss, and various things like that. So we would love for you to check us out and see what's there. And of course, this new booklet, when I checked yesterday, the PDF version to view on the website is uploaded in English, French, and in Chinese right now. The other languages are not yet viewable online, but ideally that should be coming soon. It's just a matter of time. So please take a look at us and see what's there. Before we just wrap this up, I will take the opportunity, because Amy brought it up, to talk a little bit about the education that we provide for healthcare professionals. I have been privileged enough to work with PAIL Network for just about 10 years now, providing compassionate care workshops across the province. In fact, we did one just yesterday in Peterborough, Ontario, at the Peterborough Regional Healthcare Centre, where we had 43 healthcare professionals come on their day off. They weren't even being paid to be there, to learn how to support bereaved families. And for us, this type of work is, it's incredibly rewarding to see how engaged the healthcare providers are in learning how to better support families. So we are so happy with all the changes that have happened in the last number of years, with sort of breaking the silence about pregnancy and infant loss, both provincially, but also nationally and internationally. And we are so thrilled that we are invited into communities to help the healthcare providers provide that help to families. So we are so grateful to continually be invited in and to have that privilege. And the engagement that we see at these workshops is something that really sort of carries us through those dark days when we are facing difficult situations and hearing difficult stories. But the helpers are out there and the carers are out there, and they just want to do better for families. So thank you so much on behalf of Amy and myself for inviting us to speak with you here today. And we welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you both for sharing. It's such a huge topic, a loaded topic. And so I appreciate you joining us and sharing the information that you have. My first question is, you talked a few times about the stigmatized grief. And I feel like in recent years, it's getting better. Would you guys agree with that? And why do you think it is? And why do we still have a distance to go in making it commonplace almost to talk about?
It's a great question. For me personally, for all the negative sides of social media, this is a huge positive. Not just being able to connect folks across distances with people who have a similar experience, but also when you have people like Chrissy Teigen sharing their experience online, people that are really visible from a whether it's a Hollywood or, that type of thing, sharing, being really vulnerable and personal, and sharing their experience has really normalized it for a lot of folks. And a lot of these people have taken a lot of flack for being that vulnerable online. But what you also see in those comments is, interspersed with those people that are kind of being nasty, is you have these families saying, thank you so much for speaking about this. This was my experience as well. You're so brave because you were brave. Now I can be brave. But I think on an overall, I think the reason that it's been a natural progression over the last 150 years. 150 years ago, everybody talked about death. Kids were at funerals. People died all the time.
Right.
You might have had 10 children in your family and 5 survived infancy. And dying was very, very normal. And then as healthcare improved, as lifespans improved, as people started having fewer children because more children survived infancy and less people were dying during pregnancy or during delivery, particularly in the industrialized countries. As parents, we started protecting our children from death, and we stopped talking about death, and we stopped normalizing death as children grew up, and that then turned into adults who weren't comfortable with talking with death. And in my opinion, it's just snowballed from there. I look at my mom has this giant photo album that was put together for her a million years ago. And there are some really, really old photographs in the early 1900s in there. And it's kids around a casket. It was so normal to document death and to talk about it. And I think we've just gone too far in the other direction that now everybody's uncomfortable about it. And particularly if it's about a baby.
It can silence a room.
There's nothing that stops a conversation at a dinner table more than talking about a baby dying.
Right. And I think you're right too in the misunderstanding of the depth of grief. I don't know why people would think that it's any different, but
I think for a lot of folks there is a hierarchy put on loss, the general public thinks that if you weren't pregnant for very long, then you won't have a lot of grief. And what we know is that the depth of grief is not related to the length of a pregnancy or the length of someone's life. It's directly related to the depth of the attachment. So for folks who have had potentially a long journey to get pregnant, and then have a very early loss, the depth of that attachment can be very, very deep, and therefore the grief will be deep. For other folks, they may not have been as attached to their pregnancy for a variety of reasons, and therefore they may grieve differently at the loss, regardless of what the gestation is. So it's something that isn't well recognized in the general public, and that's where these comments come up about, well, she barely knew she was pregnant. It wasn't like it was a real baby. Particularly when we're speaking about early loss.
We do have a question here that came in from Gloria, who is a healthcare provider out of province. I know that you talked about the mandate of PAIL is the province of Ontario, but her question is, does your course or education for healthcare providers, is that open to those outside of Ontario? So I know you said you had downloadable resources. Do you have that for healthcare providers on your website? Yes, or is it
anything that's on the website is open access? So there are there's a new communication module, like a self-paced learning module. There's printed resources. Anything that's on the website is open access. Unfortunately, the workshops themselves, as of right now, PAIL is limited to working within Ontario. We are hoping there will be some changes that will come, but as of right now, we are limited to work inside the province.
Now, you probably know about Canadian Premature Babies Foundation, that we are big into peer support. And that was one of the themes that you highlighted about working with families who have experienced loss themselves, then giving back as volunteers. And so I'm just wondering if you guys could put into words for me. I always like hearing, why is peer support important? And how have you seen that it's different because we all know healthcare providers care, and we hear that even from the amount of people who show up at workshops, but it is different than peer support. Can you speak a little bit about that and what you've seen?
Oh, for sure. I can speak my opinion. I can speak my professional opinion. I can speak from the words of the families and the volunteers who've come forward. And peer support is hugely impactful because talking to someone who gets it is so it's so meaningful. There's something really intimate about it. We can all go to receive some type of support from a clinician, a social worker, a psychotherapist, someone who can help us process and understand some of the things that we're experiencing and feeling. But when you're talking to someone who has experienced what you are experiencing, it's a connection that is just so personal. And I think it makes all of the difference in the world for families to not only hear, but to feel they're not alone. This is something that someone else has experienced and they have survived. They have worked through their grief, and now they're living a meaningful life while also honoring that experience. So there's hope for me. Our peer support model, our volunteers, all who offer the support, have had training to help them understand what that role really entails, because it's very easy to fall into a relationship where you're being asked for advice or what should I do. And that's not the role of a peer support volunteer. Their role is really to listen. I have this beautiful image that I share in our training that's a half of a heart and a half of an ear. And to me, that's such an illustration of what peer support is. We're listening, we're hearing, and we're understanding from our hearts. We get it. This is something that you can tell people, and it might feel good to speak about it, but to feel heard and understood by someone who's had a similar experience is irreplaceable. So, excuse me, I haven't had a frog in my throat until this last half an hour, of course. So it's really important to us that our families who reach out for support know the efforts that go into connecting them with someone who gets it. And that all of our volunteers who are on every single one of our meetings have all had that type of loss that they've had.
You also touched on grieving in NICU. And so when you are in NICU itself, the different, let's say, barriers maybe that make it difficult for a family to express that grief or move through that grief while they're in NICU. We know as NICU parents, it's busy. There's a lot going on. It is an intensive environment. And so what kind of advice would you give to families who are in NICU who want to express their grief, but are finding the balance in doing that?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is we have to acknowledge and honor the grief that comes from just being an NICU parent. Whatever the situation, whether your baby is doing well or not doing well, nobody plans to be there. Nobody wants this to happen. And there's a grief that comes along with that. You're grieving the normal pregnancy, the normal journey, the whatever you thought when you peed on that stick and you got those 2 lines. You have to grieve that as well. So there's almost now, if we think about it that way, there's 3 paths. There's the path of I have a live baby that I'm worried about and that I'm trying to support and move through that muck. There's the grief related to the pregnancy itself and the NICU journey that every single parent that's listening to us here today has at least had a taste of, regardless of whether your baby was born at 22 weeks or 35 weeks. If it's not what you planned on, there's a grieving process that happens. And then there's the grief for the baby or the babies that you've lost. So this is mucky, it's messy, it's complicated. And I don't think there's any one right way to walk that path or to go through that journey. Probably my best suggestion as someone who has held so many hands of parents going through this in the past 24 years that I've been a nurse in the NICU at Sunnybrook is just to take it one day at a time, to acknowledge when you don't feel well, and whether that's physically or whether that's emotionally, whether that's mentally, when you're not okay, and to give yourself permission to not be okay. So some families have spoken about the guilt that comes from, like, I want to be so mired down in my grief today that I don't even want to get out of bed, but I know I should get up and go and be with the live baby. Sometimes you have to let yourself just be in the muck, and it's okay. It's okay to be in the muck. There are people that will look after your baby. If you're not there, they're nowhere near as good as you are, but your baby's safe. And sometimes for your own journey and your own well-being, you have to let yourself be in the muck. And whether that's in the muck at the bedside or whether that's in the muck at home with the covers pulled over your head, I think that we as healthcare providers, we put a lot of pressure on parents already. You have to provide breast milk. You have to be here. You have to do skin to skin, to do all the things, because these are the things that we know will help your baby do better long term. And those things are all true. But at the same time, you're potentially healing still from delivering. You're grieving the loss of what you thought was going to be normal. You're adjusting to this brand new, insane environment that we've thrust you in. We're asking you to trust strangers to care for your baby. You would never hire a dog sitter off of Craigslist without interviewing them. Yet we say, we got this, go rest. You don't need to be here, which is madness for a parent. And now on top of this, you've lost a baby. So, and this is true of families who have lost babies prior to their NICU journey as well. They may be coming to us with a singleton or with every baby that was in the pregnancy still alive and in the NICU. But if they've had a loss in the past, this journey is so complicated for them. So I would say reach out to your team, find those people on the team that you feel a connection with, and be transparent with them. Ideally, people are not ignoring your grief, and they're addressing it and meeting you where you are. I can take all the education that I have and know on paper that focusing on only the living baby is may not be the healthiest way for us to help you travel this journey. But if I have a family who does not want to talk about the baby that died, then I'm not going to force that. I have to listen and meet those parents where they are. But showing that I'm a safe place. I'm a safe place to talk about what's happened, but I'm also a safe place to not talk about it if that's not what you want. But I should never give the impression that I won't talk about it, that we're not going to talk about that baby that died or that experience that happened to you. So I think that really partnering with your healthcare team when you're in the muck is really important, because they will have resources for you. They will have a shoulder for you to cry on. They can help normalize some of those challenging feelings. They can hopefully put some of your worries about your living babies to rest in the moment of how we know right now that this baby's okay, and have those conversations about how to move forward. For many of our families, we've heard from them that they tamp it down. They tamp it down. And I do remember one family, we were putting the baby in the car 180 days later. And she just looked at me and said, there's supposed to be two, and completely fell apart. And she had sort of pushed that aside for 170 days since one of her twins had died. And that day, that happiest day of we've made it, we're going home, it all came rushing back and it was when she put the car seat in the middle of the back seat, because she wasn't supposed to be able to do that. They had already, when they found out they were having twins, they were talking about how they would have to have a car seat on either side of the back seat. So just meeting them where they are and normalizing it. But for those families, it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. We support you to not be okay, and let us help you.
I think even it sounds like open door communication, in that, sometimes people don't want to talk about it. And so I appreciate that, of not forcing it on them, but at the same time, opening that door of it's okay to talk about it, and giving permission. And I think reading too, like you're talking about, every day's different. And so some days it may be, today we want to talk about it, tomorrow we don't. It's a complicated journey.
It is. It really is. It's just the layers that happen with families in the NICU to begin with. This is a really chunky layer. It's thick and it's big, and it's gonna affect everything else that happens.
And I think the advice you gave of even asking, would you like us to refer to your baby as twin B still? Or I think that kind of choice, it really shifts that invisible power wall, even of how do you want to go about this journey now? instead
I mean,
of
the
it.
reality is we're offering parenting decisions. So we're
Yeah,
offering them opportunities to continue to parent the baby that's gone.
right.
It's not up to us to decide what we think is best. The other thing we like to offer parents is, would they like their living baby moved if one of their multiples died while in our NICU? And it used to be 20 years ago, we automatically moved the baby because, of course, as
Mhm,
healthcare providers, we thought we knew best. But some
mhm,
families didn't want their baby moved. And this was really clear to me one day. I was walking in our parent hallway with a family who had lost one of their twins early on in their NICU journey. I think he just lived a few days. And the way the rooms were set up in the parent hallway, the room he was in came first, and then his sister's room came second. And we had offered her the option to move, and she said no at the time. And we'd offered her multiple times, sort of like over the weeks. And as
mhm,
we were walking down the hall just chatting, she reached her hand out and she dragged it along the door, which had had multiple babies in that room since her son had died,
mhm,
before going into her daughter's room. And so I started watching, and she did it every time she walked up and down that hallway. She just dragged her finger along the door. And in my mind, I was like, well, now I know why she didn't want her to be moved. It's her connection. She stays connected to him. She recognizes and honors that was his space, right? He was here. She's not trying to forget about him. She's not trying to pretend he wasn't here.
mhm,
But for her, that was a connection. And we have just as many families say, yes, please move my baby. I need to see a different view when I walk in to see the babies that are living. So it's not up to us to make assumptions and to decide, because every family is different.
mhm. I know that one thing we talk about in our unit is even how do you honor a loss, in terms of, I think people still try to figure out, do I have a funeral? Do I have a memorial? Do we do nothing? Do we, and I don't I don't think there's a right answer, but it's people trying to navigate something that they perhaps have never had to navigate in their life before. And so do you see healthcare providers being able to play a role in that, even in talking about those choices?
Absolutely. I think this is where we rely on our social work colleagues so strongly,
Mhm.
because they really are able to meet families where they are and discuss, the options. I think what we all need to remember is families don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And when you find out you're pregnant and you get the book, the What to Expect book, everybody skips the chapter on miscarriage, and I think everybody skips the chapter on C-section too, to be honest with you. But because that's not going to happen to me, and nobody thinks
Right.
like, okay, well, I'm going to buy the Chico car seat, and I'm going to decorate the nursery in gray elephants, and if the baby dies, I want to make sure we have a naming ceremony, because
Right.
nobody thinks that
Right.
that's going to happen to them, and nobody wants to think that way. Um,
Mhm.
and that's healthy. I do think it's healthy to not be always catastrophizing and planning for the worst.
Yep.
But when my grandmother died at 96, we knew exactly what she wanted. She changed her funeral outfit 3 or 4 times over the past 15 years. Every couple of years she would move something in a hanger in the closet, be like, "No, now I want to be buried in this one." And we knew what music she wanted, and we knew what readings she wanted and where she was going to be buried. And she had a say in this, but also we knew her as a person. For
Mhm.
families that lose a pregnancy or a baby, you don't know, first of all, what you want or what would be meaningful for you, because you've potentially never considered it. We
Right.
also know society doesn't talk about it, so for sure it's not been brought up in conversation. And we're sitting there saying to families, well, what do you want? And they're saying, I don't even know what the options are. So that's where our job is, to come in and to make sure families understand what the options are,
Mhm.
provided in a way that is honest and open and not overwhelming. So we
Mhm.
know that adults in crisis don't hear well, they don't learn well, they need things repeated. So if we put out this big smorgasbord of 75 options of how you can memorialize your baby, it's too much. So we have to really meet families and ask small amounts of questions at a time, let the next question come from the question before, but remain as non-influential as we can, because it's not up to me what I would think would be important to your family, but presenting options. So one of the things I like to say is, some families have found such and such to be meaningful
Mm.
to them. Is that something that might interest you? And to let people start thinking. Some families right away are like, this is something that I really think I want to do. And other families, they're so overcome with the grief of what's happening that it's not even occurred to them, or the things we might offer might seem weird or morbid. Why would I want to take photos of my baby after my baby dies? And it's up to us to normalize those things.
Mhm.
I also feel pretty strongly that there's no rule that I'm not willing to break other than the fire policy. I won't break the fire policy rule at the hospital. I very much go on the let's beg forgiveness later versus ask permission when it comes to trying to make something happen for a family whose baby's dying, because you don't get a second opportunity. And if
Yeah.
something is important to a family, then I would like to do my best to try to meet that need for them,
Mm.
as long as it doesn't involve an open flame. So I
Well,
don't want to put the whole hospital at risk.
that's right. I have got to say, PAIL sounds incredible. And I think both of you bring such a gift to families as you navigate something that's difficult for everyone. And you've even acknowledged the difficulty, for all of us to try and navigate together. And so I appreciate you both being here and sharing the resources, the possibilities, and also what I think, is better healthcare across the board. And so I hope that other provinces take note and develop something like PAIL in their own province, because certainly I can hear, even from the engagement that you've had with what you're doing, that it is needed and appreciated in Ontario. So thank you so much for coming on today and sharing about this, and for just being real about something that affects so many of our NICU families and healthcare providers.
Thank you,
Thank
Leah.
you.
I would like to just say one more thing. If there are families that are watching today who have had an experience of losing a baby, I hope you know that we see you and we remember you. So it doesn't matter how short of a period of time you were in our care, whether you were in our care purely from a birthing unit or labor and delivery point of view, whether your baby was in an NICU, we remember you. So, and we remember your babies. So I hope that you know that. And that we take what we learned from you and we take that forward. So the experiences we have with families color the experiences that come after. And every family I've cared for that's lost a baby, I learned something from, and I'm able to take that to the next family, unfortunately, that comes through the door. So I hope you take some comfort in knowing that your babies are not forgotten, and that we see you.
That's lovely.
Thank you so much. Yeah. A beautiful note to end on. And I think one that is provides hope for families when they know that, their loss is seen and that their family is remembered. So thank you for sharing that with us today. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Preemie Chats. I'd like to just give a special thank you to the sponsor of today's Preemie Chat, AstraZeneca, and thank them as well for their ongoing support of educational programming put on by CPBF. Just a reminder that if you missed a portion of today's session, or if you want to rewatch it, then you can head over to canadianpreemies.org, CPBF's website, and there you will find all of the past editions of Preemie Chats. You'll find many resources and support there as well. You'll also be reminded that CPBF is a charitable organization, and it depends on support to continue its important work. And so if you are able to support CPBF in its mission, whether that's by spreading the word or by making a donation, please do so. Together, we can create a brighter future for all families of premature babies in every step of their journey. I hope that you're able to join us here next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It is going to be Hope for Hypoxic Ischemic Encephalopathy. So you won't want to miss that. And I hope that you all have a great weekend. Thanks again for